We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
My name is Lou Palumbo. With us today, and as always, is Tom Fuentes, my co-host. I remind everyone, Tom is a former assistant director of the FBI, an incredibly distinguished career, and I wish we had him in charge of the FBI right now. We wouldn't be having the problems with this agency that we are. We seem to have surrendered. You know, the FBI stands for fidelity, bravery, and integrity. We've seemed to have surrendered the integrity element of that little anachronism, if that's what it's to be called. We're going to talk today about this intelligence failure in Israel. You know, Tom and I are both scratching our heads, along with some other friends of mine who have worked in the agency, in the Bureau, as to how this could have occurred. How did Britain's intelligence community miss it? How did the United States intelligence community miss it? How did the Israeli intelligence community miss it? Did they? That's the question. Piggyback to that is this element going on right now, and this opposition leadership discussion that's going on in Israel right now to remove Netanyahu in the middle of this exchange that we're going through in Gaza. And again, we're going to talk about this abortion issue and this pitfall the Republican Party keeps falling into. So I want to bring you in, Tom, and have a discussion right away about this intelligence failure with Israel. Do you think that's what happened, Tom? Is it possible that this was the byproduct of allowing it to intentionally occur, looking for a reason perhaps to save a political career or a reason to go after Hamas?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that was the reason, that they had gotten warnings from the Egyptians. And it's interesting, Egypt and Syria invaded Israel 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And Israel was losing for a short time. Then they went on offense and actually crossed the Suez Canal and took territory from Egypt. And President Nixon at the time told Israel, back off, give them that land back and negotiate. And they did. And since then, Egypt and Israel have had a great relationship since then, all these years. And Israel, of course, it was the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood, who later, part of them went to Gaza as Hamas. So Israel had to fight to get rid of them. Military operations, a government coup at one point in Egypt, and they pushed them out of Egypt. So that's why they don't want refugees from Gaza coming in or anybody else, because they know Hamas will get back into Egypt and regain power. So Egypt had warned Israel that they had intelligence that Hamas was training and preparing for an attack on Israel. Then you've got Israeli intelligence, supposed to be among the best in the world, the Mossad and Shin Bet, working with CIA, the best of American foreign intelligence, working with the UK, MI6, their intelligence. And all together, they don't see this attack coming. And Hamas had gone so far as to build a model village in Gaza to practice attacking and invading, which is what they used those techniques later when they invaded Israel on October 7. So it's very, very suspicious that Israel should miss every possible sign that they're coming over that fence, they're going to invade, and then basically allow it to happen. Now, did Israel decide that a minor attack wouldn't be so bad? They'll sacrifice a few hundred Israeli lives to get the public stirred up to go into Gaza once and for all and wipe out Hamas. And in this case, did they underestimate how severe the attack would be, killing 1,400 Israelis, the savagery of the attack, the way the murders were perpetrated, that Netanyahu could look at this and say, I told you Hamas is terrible. We're not going to be out of the woods with being rocketed all the time unless we go into Gaza and take these guys out once and for all. And that's what's in progress right now.
So, Tom, I think it's safe to say that there's legitimate skepticism as to whether or not they were aware this was going to happen. And you use this word incursion, and I'd like to remind everyone that's the same word our president used when he stated that a minor incursion into the Ukraine by Russia could be tolerated. I mean, this is an interesting mentality. Like, you can stick me a little bit with a knife, you just can't put it in too deep. And then you got to hope they don't put it in too deep, which could be exactly what happened here. I hate to be such a skeptic. And, interestingly enough, in my business, I bump up against Shin Bet and I don't know who the Mossad is, and I don't really want to know, but I can tell you recently during the United Nations General Assembly Climate Week, I was in a hotel with Netanyahu. And there's such an intensity with these guys. I call them bulls in a china shop, which I don't really have a problem with because I appreciate the need for intensity. How this slipped through the cracks, I got to tell you, I'm having a hard time believing that, to be very candid with you. And, as far as this whole minor incursion being tolerated, maybe they were taking that from the playbook that we set the groundwork for in the Ukraine. I don't understand what this is all about here, but the one thing that's irrefutable at this point is that they're engaged fully, and we have to support them, which is why we have carrier groups off the coast, and we're lending them tons of technology to knock down rockets, and we're arming them and funding them right now, which I have to say is something we need to do. What we really need to do, ladies and gentlemen, is try to establish a coalition in the Middle East so we can address this terrorist element, Hamas, and maybe have some back channel discussions with the people who are Palestinians to say, let us help you rid yourselves of Hamas so you can kind of govern yourself in peace. What people don't understand is that there was a relationship being built between Saudi Arabia and Israel. In fact, if I have my facts correct, they were collaborating on a desalination plant, the two of them. And the other thing I've been hearing is that there are countries in the Middle East that are not completely upset with Israel going after Hamas because they see them potentially as a liability. Now, the real fly in this ointment, I hate to say this, is Iran. And I don't want to go off on Obama. I'm going to let Tom do that in a second. But there's a problem with this country's relationship with Iran. And if I understand this, Tom, and I want you to correct me when you come back to me, are we allowing them to sell oil? I go to you, Tom.
Absolutely. That's how they're making money again. So you had a prohibition against them being able to sell oil, and now they're selling it, and a good part of it going to China. So, the idea that we're going to sanction Iran or put them, under wraps so far has been a failure. Now, it appears, and the intelligence was reporting in the final years of Trump, that the clampdown, the sanctions, the prohibition against selling oil, against obtaining missiles, any number of things, was working, and that Iran was going broke, that they were in big financial trouble. Now, under our current administration, it appears that Joe Biden is allowing them to re-enrich themselves. First of all, selling the oil. They've basically, have their economy back at, booming basically in Iran is one of the issues. But the other issue behind the scenes that you were starting to talk about, which I had mentioned before, is that a number of experts on these relationships are saying that the countries surrounding Israel that are saying, if this continues, the slaughter of people in Gaza, we're going to join a coalition of Arab nations, Muslim nations that are going to go against Israel, going to attack Israel. And then some of us are hearing back channel that maybe not, that maybe the Saudis in particular are applauding Israel. Whatever you do, wipe out Hamas. Whatever you do, prevent Hezbollah from gaining more power. And you have a situation where Turkey, for example, the head of Turkey is giving speeches that he wants to be the head of Islam worldwide. And Iran, and of course, Turkey is a Arab Sunni Muslim country. Iran is a Shia Muslim country, Persian, and the Shias and the Sunnis have been fighting each other for 1,000 years. When I was the FBI commander in Iraq in 2003, they were blowing up each other's mosques in Iraq, fighting each other and killing each other there. They slaughtered one group for having a parade on a bridge. And so that Sunni versus Shia warfare has been ongoing for centuries. Now, all of a sudden, some people are saying, well, Turkey and Iran are in agreement that Israel's doing the wrong thing and that they're going to stop it. And some experts are alleging that Israel has accomplished something that nobody's been able to do for hundreds of years, and that is unite Shia and Sunni Muslims into one coalition. Now, that may be true. However, right now, Israel has a couple 100,000 soldiers in their military, another couple 100,000 reservists. The U.S. has about 350,000 soldiers ready to go to war. In Turkey, well, allegedly ready. In Turkey, they have 1 million men in their army and another 1 million on reserve, and they can drive to Israel in about 12 hours and be in the Golan Heights in northern Israel, or they could take ships across the Mediterranean to invade Israel. So you have a combination of countries between Turkey and Iran that are 10 times bigger than Israel. They could really, and us. The question would be, well, the U.S. is going to save them. Really? Maybe. Some military people think, no, we won't, and we can't. So there's a lot of issues here. Now, starting to say earlier that the Saudi Arabian country hates terrorists. They want order. They want their people, their rulers to be billionaires, to live rich and famous and all of that, not be too religious, just make money. And then you've got, Turkey is another country. They don't want terrorists. Egypt is another one. They got rid of the Muslim Brotherhood that morphed into Hamas. They don't want them back. So they're quietly backing Israel. We heard all this talk earlier. If Israel keeps up this invasion of Gaza, they're going to all join together and invade Israel. Well, they've kept this up now for well over 5-6 weeks, and you don't see any sign of Saudi Arabia trying to move or Turkey or any of these countries going after Israel. It's like they're all sitting back saying, "We really think you've gone too far. By the way, keep it up. Under the table. Good job. Keep it up."
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to $50, $100, even $300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
Thomas, an observation I've made with Islam, and I'm not saying this because I'm Islamophobic or anything like that, because I'm not. I don't have time, because I have friends that are Muslim. I have neighbors that are Muslim. One in particular is a great guy. There's an interesting dynamic attached to Islam. It's called this radical element that calls for the destruction of the Western civilization that I suspect are on domestic soil here, ladies and gentlemen, burning our flags and promoting this disruption as we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. I'm trying to figure out what the radical element is attached to Judaism. And that's right, there is none. The radical element that's attached to Catholicism. And that's right, there is not. The thing I say to the Muslim world, to people who are of Islamic belief, is you need to start to police yourself. And at some point, you might want to divorce yourself from that radical element that gives you guys a bad name, creates a bad optic. Because one thing we've learned about people, we like to stereotype. It's just this lazy characteristic we developed. We experience it, Tom and I, in law enforcement. You see one bad cop and you want to just say they're all bad cops. And that's the same thing that holds true with Islam. That isn't the case, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of people that are of Islamic beliefs that are good people. In fact, we were living in New York City still. We had a young lady who was Muslim. She was a lovely girl, and interestingly enough, spoke to her quite extensively, and she was conflicted. And because of a lot of this conversation that takes place day to day, carried out by your media, who really don't care about what they say, as long as they can say something to keep a viewer and a sponsor and their salaries going. But independent of that, we need to start to have a conversation with Islam and to try to support them and them separating themselves from this radical element that's prone to violence. And they have them. Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all do this in the name of Islam. You can say what you want to say about it, folks, but that's what they're doing. And at some point in time, and this is what I go back and say about people coming to our country, there are elements of your culture that if you want to assimilate and become part of this great country, you have to abandon. Contribute those parts of your culture that contribute to the greater good. Same thing with religion. Let me be unequivocal about this statement. I am not a proponent of organized religion. I'm not a proponent of any mechanism that divides or polarizes us, and religion seems to have a way of doing that. And I know that through experiencing growing up in New York. People that are Jewish don't want people outside the Jewish faith marrying into their faith. The Catholics are the same damn way. Muslims are the same way. Oh, yeah, by the way, the Italians don't want people marrying into the Italian families. The Irish, my mother was Scotch, Irish, and Cherokee Indian from Arkansas. She had her bananas broken by my father's sisters, whose parents came off the boat. I know what this mentality is, guys. We got to upwards the thinking process here. And that could occur if we could change the leadership in this country, and not just the president, but it starts with the president. The president is someone that has to be inspirational, guys. Ask yourself the last time we had that. And I mentioned two men earlier in another show, another podcast with Tom, about who those two men were. That's what's lacking today in the country. And I'm bouncing again on you, and I apologize. But bottom line is all of these things we speak about become the sum of all parts. As far as
Lou, if I could add something here.
Absolutely.
You talked about, that, let's say, the Catholic Church, we have not had them going after people trying to kill them or wage
recently.
Exactly. And that's just what I was going to say. When, my ancient ancestor, Hernan Cortez, the Spanish conquistador, invaded Mexico, took on the Aztecs there. Those ships had dozens of Catholic priests on those ships. And when they went ashore with the conquistadors and saw the practices of the Aztecs, taking people's hearts out and eating them and doing all kinds of violent acts, the priests said to the Aztecs and later to the Incas and later to the Mayans, basically stop that and start worshiping Jesus, start worshiping the person we worship or the religion that we worship. And if they didn't, they were killed. And so I refer to that as, later you had the Reformation in the Catholic Church and kind of put an end to that. But my description of that is jihad for Jesus. You start worshiping Jesus, we'll let you live. If you don't, we're going to kill you. And that was a common practice for the Spanish. And that's why from Mexico to the tip of Argentina is mostly Catholic. Most of South America, Central America, Mexico, the Caribbean became Catholic. And it was partly or mainly because these priests told the local indigenous population, you convert to our religion or you die. Simple.
You know what, Tom? And that's a great point that you just made. And maybe what we learned from this is that we learn the error in our way and we evolve. So Tom just pointed out something that's highly relevant to this conversation, that in Catholicism that did exist, and all I'm saying today is get in step with modern time, learn from the mistakes of the past, and forge forward. That's really what we're really talking about today. I've said this before in other podcasts. there's this ill-conceived notion that we're going to allow everybody from no matter where you reside on the planet to come to America and live under one roof, and everybody's going to be happy together. I just don't think that's likely, guys. I hate to say that. And I'm not going to attach that to another statement saying some people should leave. If we're going to embrace that concept, you better start to figure out how we're going to assimilate you, and we don't do that. Now, Tom mentioned something rather interesting with the Spanish and the Aztecs and the Inca. I guess that's a form of assimilation. It's a little bit extreme in my opinion, but the bottom line is, guys, we have to put our thinking hats on here as how we're going to make this place better going forward. And that's what this whole exercise is about with this podcast, trying to identify problems, learn from them, and push forward, not continue to wallow in them and beat each other over the head. I want to bring up this abortion issue. If I can, Tom, I'd like to transition into it because for some reason, the Republican Party is having a problem understanding this is a very emotionally charged issue. It's probably one of the most slippery, if not the most slippery slopes there are in politics today. And at some point in time, you better turn a corner and realize you have to unconditionally support our women. And I think women should be leading the charge on this discussion. And if we're going to contribute, it should be somewhat as a support mechanism. Now, there are, interestingly enough, some examples where men might want to have a little more input into an abortion occurring. And I'm just going to touch on this very lightly. Two people are engaged in sexual activity, and the young woman becomes pregnant, and suddenly she wants to no longer have the child. Well, what if the man says he'd like to have the baby? Now, the problem there is that mom has to be the host of the child. So there's a lot of area here that needs to have discussion. But in general, I would say steer clear of this discussion unless you intend on allowing women to have the larger voice in this discussion. And when I look at someplace like Texas, pass an abortion law, and I'd like you to correct me, Tom, if I'm misspeaking, there was no exemption written in for rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancy. How could that be? How could we be living in the times in which we are and not realize that these are states of occurrence that you should stay the hell out of? And if anything, work in some type of support capacity to help them reconcile a path of travel here, folks. I mean, I don't get it, but you know what? In a very general sense, we do nothing but patronize our women anyway. So let's stop the bullshit here today, folks. You know, we talk about objectification. No one objectifies them more than Hollywood. They make an enormous amount of money off women. And this incredible phenomenon occurs out there. Every woman, if they're going to have a successful career, has to do something where she's naked, topless at least, in order to promote her career. Guys, I've lived it. I've watched it. I ran the security for the Academy Awards in the early 90s around the Iraqi conflict. I ran the Golden Globes 14 years. I worked for the American Film Institute, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild. I worked for everyone out there, guys, and my eyes were wide open, which is why I can speak to you as literately as I can today, because I just kind of sat back and took it in, objectively speaking. Let me go one step further with our women. You don't want to make them, fall into, I would say, a belief that we care about them unconditionally. Let's start changing the sentencing guidelines. If you assault a woman or if you rape a woman and a child, by the way, we need to change them in regards to that. You sexually assault a woman, you go to jail for the rest of your life. This is not a crime of fruition, ladies and gentlemen. It's an illness and it's untreatable. If someone can prove to me it's treatable other than medication, let me know. And by the way, the fly in the ointment with medication is if you come off your meds, you revert back to the act. And I've always said, and I still believe, it's the highest rate of recidivism of any crime committed. You know why I say that to you comfortably? Because of how many sexual assaults go unreported. Because we live in a culture where we just don't understand the importance of supporting women when this occurs. And I can also tell you this, coming out of the law enforcement community, and I don't know if it still exists, but it existed at one time, that we almost made women feel like the victim, as if they contributed to it because they dressed in a suggestive manner. They were seductive. I don't know what to tell you all, but it's simple. Change the sentencing guidelines. You have to convince our women we love them and care about them unconditionally. The abortion issue is one of these discussions. The other thing attached to this with the Republicans is this whole a discussion about Christianity. Guys, I was raised Roman Catholic. I don't want to hear about your religious beliefs. Those should be sacred to yourself, not something that I have to live by because you live by it. Because what if everybody took up that mantle? Who the hell would we know who to turn to based on your religious beliefs? I thought you wanted to have separation of church and state. You know, guys, these are not complicated conversations here. Tom, I'd like you to just give an opinion yourself, because I know we may not totally agree on this topic, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, we've gone from almost one extreme to the other. Here in Virginia, 2 governors ago, abortion was allowed all the way up to, delivery of the baby. So they would say, okay, this woman's been carrying the baby for 9 months. Now she wants an abortion. Go ahead and force it. And in some cases, it's reported that the baby was born alive. And now they decided that, the governor and the politicians decided that, well, if the woman still wants to not have that baby, even though it's alive, make it comfortable, give it painkillers, and let it die. And, I looked at that as that's infanticide, that's murder. Baby is a living human being after delivery, after the 9th month. Now then, recently you've had people say, well, no, we don't want the baby to be allowed to be carried full term. Even Hillary Clinton advocated that. Oh, the woman should be able to carry the baby right up to the last minute and then abort. So then Governor Youngkin gets elected here a year ago, and he, was advocating a policy here that abortion should be allowed, but only up till the 15th week. After that, no more. And most people that advocate abortions thought that was too extreme. And so now, at the time of the most recent election, earlier in November, you had the Democrats controlled the Republicans, the Senate, state Senate. And then the Republicans took over the delegates from the House. So you had Republicans in the House, Democrats running the Senate. The election happens this past November, and the Republicans lose both houses. Now they're both Democrat. And many, experts here are saying that maybe Governor Youngkin was too severe, saying 15 weeks should be the cutoff, when a lot of the proponents, not even if they don't advocate carrying the baby all the way to 9 months, usually say somewhere a little longer than 15 weeks and up to maybe 20 or 20, somewhere in between should be allowed. And a lot of people think that the Republican measures advocated by Youngkin were too severe, and that's how they lost the House of Delegates here in Virginia.
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free rare coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
That's a good explanation, and a truthful explanation, interestingly enough. I don't want to simplify this discussion because it's not simple. What we need to do, if we can, because we're harming the credibility of every institution in this country, including science and medicine, we politicize them, weaponize them during the pandemic. When does life actually begin? That's something our scientists and our medical people should be able to tell us. And what is the week, and that's where this discussion has to start. I'm reluctant to get too deeply involved in this discussion because, it's a polarizing discussion. 15 weeks, I think countries like France have 10 or 12 weeks. Tom, did you ever hear anything?
I don't know their exact number, but Youngkin advocated 15 weeks, and his position was, at that point, a fetus can feel pain. So it's too brutal to terminate the the pregnancy after that. But up to 15
Was that
weeks,
Freudian? Was that Freudian?
yeah, it might be. That's not my way of getting the impeachment discussion started. But in any event, that was the idea behind Youngkin's position of 15 weeks. The baby can feel pain now after 15 weeks.
Here's the question, Tom. Is that scientifically and medically supported? If that's the case, then that's a discussion point. This discussion about late-term abortions, like the baby could be born, guys, that's murder. And I guarantee you this, the first time that happens, you're going to have a prosecution. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The key here is to try to keep the cuckoo in the clock and take the fringe element they hold these extreme or radical positions on these discussions like abortion out of the conversation as much as possible, so we can get to some form of resolution. But let us be clear about something. The women need to lead the charge on this thing. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to stop patronizing to them. Anyway, guys, next time we come back here, we're going to have a discussion about the Ukraine and what's going on. It appears that Putin has doubled his military offensive in the Ukraine, and I'm curious to know what that's going to translate to. And we're going to talk about the Donald Trump trial a little bit, among other things, because, if people think Donald Trump's the only guy that could be prosecuted in the manner in which he is, boy, are you misguided. Guys, this has been Operation Truth. We look forward to you having tune in again. We want you to become part of this conversation, guys. Also, you can contact us through operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to criticize or question us. We're not here to sit here and spoon feed you. Thank you for joining us. Tom, I thank you as always for your wisdom and your insight.
Lou, yes, I'd rather not be criticized, if you don't mind.
Okay, when you call in or you communicate, don't criticize Tom. You can criticize me. I shouldn't have spoke for Tom. That's it in a nutshell. We'll see you next time, guys.